Hey guys, welcome back to the City Who Never Sleeps. Once again, I'm Christian Forte, and on this channel, I'll mainly be covering politics. If you like my content, please like my videos or subscribe to my channel, or both. Today, I want to talk about the sexual assault allegations against Joe Biden, which you may or may not have heard about, depending on where you get your news from. The mainstream media have been largely absent from covering the story, so we'll get to that. As well as what happened when the victim, in this case, the accuser named Tara Reid, reached out to Time's Up, the organization which was instrumental in providing assistance for several women of the involved in high-profile cases, Me Too cases, since late 2017 that resulted in the downfall of many high-profile prominent male figures such as Harvey Weinstein, etc. So we'll talk about what happened when Time's Up declined to help to provide help to Tara Reid when she reached out for help. And before we go any further, I would like to first, in case you guys weren't at all familiar with these allegations, give you some basic information on what's going on here. And that is that Tara Reid, a former Joe Biden staffer from back in his Senate days, is alleging that in 1993 there was an incident when at his office she went to hand him a gym bag, and he abruptly forced himself on her and began kissing her, put his hand up her skirt and penetrated her with his finger. Really graphic, disturbing details that are basically the basic information that you need to know with regards to what is the allegation. And then we'll get to, again, the mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, Washington Post have failed to cover the story, which I think is also notable. But before that, I want to get into Ryan Grimm's reporting. Ryan Grimm, the Washington, D.C. bureau chief over at The Intercept, reported on what happened when in January, Tara Reid reached out to Time's Up seeking financial assistance for PR and legal, legal help, legal subsidies for the people, defaming her. A lot of people have been very hostile towards her, etc. And Time's Up actually declined to take up this case. The reason being they felt that doing so because the accused was a candidate for federal office, that doing so could pose a risk that would jeopardize their status as a 501c3 nonprofit. If their intervention was seen as electioneering, which, if you don't know what that means, there are laws in place that prevent taxpayer money from subsidizing organizations that engage in electioneering, which is influencing elections, interfering in elections, etc., which seems like a pretty reasonable tax law that should be in place, except it's not one that applies in this case. As Ryan Grimm quotes in his article, a tax law professor, who states that as long as the criteria applied here are the long-established standard, consistent with all previous cases, neutral and irrespective of any political context in this particular case, there is no violation of tax law. So number one, that's a very narrow, faulty interpretation of tax law. Ryan Grimm also stated in a subsequent appearance on Hill Rising that refraining from going public with this information in January versus March during a presidential primary cycle constitutes activity that could also easily be perceived as influencing an election if you really want to go there. And Ryan Grimm also noted in his appearance on Hill Rising the disturbing irony apparent in the idea that, potentially millions of dollars that were donated to Time's Up's GoFundMe. In fact, $24 million, the most ever raised for a GoFundMe since the page was set up in December 2017. Potentially millions of those dollars were donated by individuals, not because of any perceived personal tax benefit, not because they were looking for a $100 reduction on next year's tax bill, so much as because they just genuinely believed in the message and cause that the company purported to represent. Right, which is standing up for women that are fighting back against abuses from powerful men in male-dominated industries, which seems like a pretty accessible thing that people would genuinely be interested in donating and helping out with. Now, this is not the first time that Tara Reid has come forward. Oh, The article also notes that the PR firm that represents Time's Up, SKD Knickerbocker, is managed by Anita Dunn, who is also the top advisor and effective campaign manager of Biden's presidential campaign. All right, so even if you set that bombshell fact aside, Time's Up looks terrible here. I think we can objectively agree on that. Now, the article also explains that this is not the first time that Tara Reade's gone public with allegations against Biden. The first time having been last April when she went to a local reporter to be interviewed after seeing the way Lucy Flores' allegation was dismissed as politically motivated by the panel on The View. Now, Lucy Flores, you might recall, was the woman, a former Nevada State Assemblywoman who accused Joe Biden of touching her and kissing the back of her neck during a 2014 rally. Tara was subsequently, it's coming out the first time, received backlash from supporters of Biden who accused her also of being politically motivated and even of running interference for Russian President Vladimir Putin. Apparently because she had posted a Medium article that was favorable towards him. And also because it's also become Democratic Party establishment orthodoxy to impugn as a bad faith Russian agent anyone who bucks the official party line. So let's just be real about that fact as well. Tara Reade rightfully questioned on Hill Rising why her views on the current geopolitical climate should factor into the media narrative on her motivations any more than they would Biden's, which seems like a fair point to me to be raised. Nevertheless, even though Tara Reade has seems like a pretty credible claim, she has filed had filed a contemporaneous claim at the time that she alleges this took place, as well as confided in individuals such as her mother, who since passed away, her brother, and her best friend, who've corroborated her account. Tara Reade has been skeptically received by supporters of Biden, who again have accused her of being politically motivated, both because of the timing and because she supports and has supported Bernie Sanders, obviously a Biden opponent, as well as Elizabeth Warren, Biden opponent. By the way, Elizabeth Warren, who the article also notes Tara reached out to at some point, and from whose campaign she received a form letter in response. But because she supported opponents of Biden, right? Of course, it would be ridiculous to expect her to support someone that she claims sexually assaulted her, but apparently they don't see it that way. Biden supporters also cite Ryan Grimm's involvement as suspicious, and all the more reason to discredit her claim. Even though Ryan Grimm was the one that first broke the Christine Blasey Ford allegations against Kavanaugh during the Kavanaugh hearings in the first place. Remember, these are the same people that defended Blasey Ford against the kind of slut-shaming and victim-blaming they're now subjecting Tara to, which was supposed to be what Believe All Women and #MeToo was against. So just keep that in mind as well. Biden's campaign has released two statements, those being, women have a right to tell their story, and reporters have an obligation to rigorously vet those claims. We encourage them to do so because these accusations are false. And for nearly 20 years, I worked as Senator Biden's executive assistant and supervised dozens of employees who reported to me. In all my years working for Senator Biden, I never once witnessed or heard of or received any reports of inappropriate conduct, period. Not from Ms. Reade, not from anyone. Sidebar, can you imagine if this had happened to Bernie Sanders? Do you think the mainstream media would remain so silent? Oh, I should mention that Tara was initially intimidated after coming out the first time. The intense pressure intimidated her, and she had resolved at the time to go back into silence before obviously recently reconsidering in the hope of setting a positive example for her daughter. So before I forget, I just wanted to include that detail. That being said, Tara has been very outspoken about the fact that she vehemently dislikes Trump and doesn't want to help her campaign or be offered any support by him. And I really want to stress this point because you guys know that's exactly what's going to happen here. Donald Trump is going to try to seize on this as an opportunity the way he did with Juanita Broaddrick, whom was similarly dismissed by the Democratic Party and aligned media establishment when she renewed allegations of rape against Bill Clinton during the 2016 cycle. For the same reason that we now can assume the Democratic Party did during the Kavanaugh hearings when Christine Blasey Ford testified that Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her. And the same reason the Democratic Party-aligned mainstream media have failed to cover this story, but were all over the story when women came out with similar allegations against Trump a few years back. And even Elizabeth Warren, the so-called progressive Biden opponent, who branded herself as a woke cultural symbol of women's empowerment and embraced full-on gender warrior tokenism, when Tara reached out to her campaign and was met with a standard "don't call me, I'll call you" form letter in response. And listen, Me Too looks bad in this as well, right? For making it known that their commitment to empowering women who stand up to abuses from powerful men in male-dominated industries has limits. Because the most powerful members of our society, this is all just partisan hackery. If anything, this proves that they're all politically motivated. There are no boundaries there are no core boundaries or underlying principles that will override their self-interest as it applies to maintaining their bipartisan and media consensus of power. They're all inside the club. This is all just a sport to them, where politics and elections have no real-world consequences, so long as both sides get to always go back and forth, knowing that they'll never be personally negatively affected as long as that remains the real power struggle. But to have someone step in and threaten to disrupt that order during a presidential primary season steeped in desperate times, where the underlying class inequality of that structure is fraught with questions and uncertainty, where actual real-world social and economic justice is on offer, someone like Bernie Sanders, that's against the rules. Remember, Biden is the same guy who, in a major position of power as Senate Judiciary Committee chairman, when Anita Hill testified with allegations against Clarence Thomas during Thomas Supreme Court confirmation hearings in 1991, cut a backroom deal with Republicans. At a time when Democrats control the Senate and could easily have blocked Thomas' confirmation if that's what Biden had wanted to do and could have done with his leadership, that's what Biden chose to do. Biden's always been a media creation, onto whom comfortable elites projected some ethereal aura of electability that's never really been self-evident in reality. He's not even a particularly strong or inspiring speaker, just a mercenary, an empty vessel, with no clear or coherent ideology, vision, or prescription for addressing the structural rot at the heart of our political or economic system, hired by the masters of our economy to contain the rising tide of left populism and social democracy coming from the base. Just compare Biden's fawning television interviews to Bernie's, whom pundits grill openly antagonistically for daring to remain in the presidential race and carry on with his selfish message of Medicare for all during an unprecedented public health and economic crisis, even as half the country has yet to vote, and polling indicates that fixing healthcare is the top priority of independents, many of whom are still undecided in deciding who to support in this Democratic primary race. So the Democratic and corporate media establishment, politics is a sport. And as long as the status quo managers of the two parties and the pundit class agree that nothing must fundamentally change the current concentration of power, then all the women with credible stories of personal trauma brave enough to speak out and challenge that power will have to reckon with just how far their movement has come to gain so little. Biden himself, during the Kavanaugh hearings, was quoted as saying, "For a woman to come forward in the glaring lights of focus, nationally, you've got to start off with the presumption that at least the essence of what she's talking about is real." Apparently, Time's Up agrees, with the giant asterisk that anybody running for federal office to be one of the most powerful people in the world is strictly off limits. Until such time as that caveat is removed from the equation, the Tara Reids and Christine Blasey Fords of the world will just have to know their role and deal with it.